Well, hello, boys and girls. Hope you're enjoying the beautiful day today. I'm going to finish and continue our story about Jesus and the story of the Easter love letters from God. We read about Palm Sunday. Got our little egg with the palm in it. See if I can find the picture. There it is. Palm Sunday. Then that was when he was riding into Jerusalem to see his friends. Jerusalem is a city where it's really warm, so they had their sandals on long, long ago. Jesus washed their feet, reminded us that we are to be like him and help others. We read about the Last Supper. We shared it with his friends, and we learned about one friend named Judas that betrayed him. After they had their special supper, and we heard about his body and his blood, they went to a garden. And you can see in the picture, it's becoming evening. This is the part I want to read to you today. This story is called The Gloomy Garden. Darkness fell as the disciples followed Jesus out into the night. Jesus walked through the quiet streets toward a garden, the Garden of Gethsemane. He wanted to pray. The moon shone through the olive trees as Jesus knelt down. The garden felt gloomy. It was very still. "Father, are you there?" Jesus said quietly. "Do I have to die? Is there any other way?" There was no reply. Jesus sobbed. He didn't want to die, but he trusted God. Even though he knelt alone, he knew that God was with him, and he was ready. The sound of heavy footsteps broke the silence of the night. There were angry shouts filling the air. Jesus looked up through his tears, and there were shadowy figures coming at him. There were torches flickering in the light. The soldiers were there to take him away. Jesus stood up. He knew it was his time to go. Here's your love letter from God. Have you ever felt alone like Jesus did? When you feel that way, I want you to remember something very important. You are never alone. I am always by your side. Those soldiers might have taken Jesus away from the garden, but they would never take him away from me. And there is nothing that you can ever do that you will be taken away from me either. Remember this promise. I am always with you. Love, God. High on the hillside is where they took Jesus, and they hung him on the cross. They nailed his hands and feet to the wood. A crown of spiky thorns was on his head. Jesus was ready to die, but he was still afraid. He could see his mother Mary was crying. He could hear soldiers laughing. He could feel the sharp nails. Jesus cried out. He could not move. He could not breathe. He felt all alone. The sun disappeared behind a huge gray cloud. The cold and darkness crept over the world. Jesus closed his eyes. He bowed his head, and he took one last breath. At 3:00 in the afternoon, cold and darkness, Jesus died. The wind howled, the whole earth trembled, the rocks shattered, the hills quaked, and the mighty curtain in the temple split in two. But Jesus was still. It was finished. Dear boys and girls, shall I tell you a secret? When Jesus was dying on the cross, I was crying too. When those nails were hurting Jesus, I was hurting too. When Jesus felt all alone, I felt alone. And when my son died, part of me died too. But guess what? Death does not win in this story. Life wins. Love wins. My promise to Jesus was that nothing could separate him from my love, and that is the promise I want you to know. But that is the promise I give to you. Love God. That's the second part of our story, boys and girls. And in your special book, I bet you've been coloring some of those pictures. The Easter story. Had our Palm Sunday where you did the palm, the little palm branch in. Where Jesus washed their feet. And you put the towel in your egg. Put a penny in an egg to remind you of Judas who betrayed Jesus. And you did the bread and the wine, his body and blood. And now today, we're going to color the picture. Maybe you already have Jesus in the garden praying, but in your carton of eggs, you should have a fun little star. Open her. Fun star to remind you of the garden and Jesus praying. And that's where the soldiers came to get him. Didn't tell us in our story, but in the garden, Judas stepped forward and kissed Jesus on the cheek so the soldiers would know who Jesus was. Then they took him away and they gave him a crown because his friends knew that he was the king of heaven. But the other kings didn't like that. So they gave him a special crown of thorns. I'm not sure you can see it online, but I have a really spiky thorn. You might find thorns on a rose bush outside when you're playing. You might see other kinds of thorns. It wouldn't be very comfortable. Then they took him, gave him a cross that he had to carry through the town. And when they got to the place where they nailed him on the cross, they nailed his hands and feet. And so you have a nail to put in your egg. And then there's a dice. Oh, I'm going to show you those pictures too. Here's where he carried the cross with his crown of thorns. Here's where they nailed him on the cross. Again, boys and girls, I just colored parts of it, the important parts, because sometimes it's a lot to color. Same with this picture. This is where the soldiers, after he was hung on the cross, they shook dice because clothes then weren't like clothes today where you could go shopping for lots of clothes. So he had a special cloth that they rolled a dice for. So that's what that is. Whoever got the high number got Jesus's cloth. And so I colored the soldiers' hats because they were the important part of this story. You can color it all if you want. That's where I'm going to stop for today. We're going to hear the rest of the story. I'm excited about that part because it's the happy part. See you later, boys and girls. Enjoy the day.